Jeff Allen from SAP, and we'll speak about making minority language translation a profitable translation business model. So this is a very interesting topic, and please welcome Jeff Allen. Thank you.
Great. So what's a minority language? We have to define what a minority language. A minority language is not a major language. Okay, that's the definition. So pretty much about 80 to 90% of everything that exists of the 7,000 world languages today. There are feedback forms. Please fill out the feedback forms afterwards. I'm an ISO 9000 auditor, and 2 weeks ago at SAP France, we got a non-conformity because we had a class that somebody didn't fill out the feedback form. Since I'm an auditor, I want you to fill out the feedback form so I don't get another non-conformity for SAP. Okay? So there are feedback forms here. Please fill those out. The toilets are okay. That's all covered. Good. So, I'll get a little. This is really cool. You can actually see where you're at. Okay. So why can I address this topic? I think that's very important. And Ralph shared yesterday the credentials of what he was doing, and I think it's very important for this type of thing as well. Why can I talk about it? Am I here just to jump on the bandwagon of a new idea, get the hype, go through that cycle, and then to be able to say, yeah, I talked about something? That's not quite the case. And I'm going to explain that because it's more than just a new idea. It's what we talked about yesterday, and what Ralph brought up. I'm going to bring up a lot of those topics as well. It's going to build upon it, and it's going to really solidify, and something that touches us for our businesses. Okay? So everybody thinks, what do people know me as? What do I usually talk about? What's my topic? What I talk about all the time? Machine translation, machine translation. Everything's on machine translation. The godfather of machine translation is my name. But does anybody know what I did before that? Does anybody know what I've done before that? Did anybody know I worked in Creole languages before that? Yeah. I spent a decade working on Creole. I actually studied here in Lyon for 5 years, did my master's and my doctorate degrees on Creole linguistics, on St. Lucian Creole. And most people don't know that. I spent about a decade doing that. Well, a decade of working and doing studies and all that stuff. And so lots of field work. And then at the end of the 90s, I became known as the technology guy for minority languages, linguistics and all languages. So translation, text-to-speech. At Carnegie Mellon, I built a speech-to-speech Haitian Creole English system for the U.S. military. Okay? So that's why I can talk about very sensitive topics, because military things, it's, for translators, it's a different topic. And then I was advisor of the Catanal Alaskan Language Project for developing all those Alaska Native languages for different types of technologies to support those languages. Okay? That was the end of the 90s and beginning of 2000s. And then I worked at ELDA here up in Paris, the European Language Resources Distribution Agency, which basically is supported by the European Commission to have databases of all these European projects that are funded and then it all disappears, to have a repository of the databases for written and text and speech databases. And I was the technical director, and then basically I wrote reports for the European Commission for them to decide, based on surveys. I was the Common Sense Advisory before Common Sense existed. Okay? And then I wrote reports for the European Commission for them to decide what they would fund in the human language or technology field. So that was back in the late 90s, beginning of 2000s. So I was doing market watch and then helping the European Commission decide what they would do on all their programs to invest and co-fund. People don't know that. Okay? So I did all the research of what languages existed, how many databases, and for speech and text, and built speech.car databases for recording people in their car so that your phones right now can understand you when you're talking on your mobile, when you're in the car in all different driving environments. You know, really cool stuff. And then I was CEO of kind of a startup company called MIT2, because the person that started was from MIT, and she wanted to start MIT2, so it's called Mason Integrated Technologies. And it was for minority languages, and I wrote a 130-page business plan. That was the long version, and then the short version is 30 pages with 26 products and services all. And you know what killed it? 9/11, because I wasn't doing Arabic. All the investors disappeared the next day because they wanted Arabic, not these minority languages. So the $1 million wasn't there. .com crash, 9/11 buy. Okay. And then I haven't just done MT, I've also sold. So translation.com, before my current job, I started up all the translation.com business in Paris for France, all Francophone Europe. So for corporate online data and all that, but basically all the translations. You know, some paper, but mainly software and websites and all those kinds of things. So I've been where you're at, trying to have the resources and to sell it to people for expensive prices. Okay. And then about 4 years ago, after the Haiti earthquake, my wife and I supported a Haitian child for 7 years. I wrote in Creole. So I have documentation of our correspondence for 7 years, and one day we got a letter saying he's finished school. Now I couldn't keep contact with him because I wish I had, but I have all that correspondence back and forth for 7 years, moving between two countries, keeping contact and all that. And so that, plus this MI2 thing that fell apart, and this business plan sitting on a shelf for literally 15 years. The Haiti earthquake happened, and I was sitting there crying in front of the TV because I had built a translation system that could be used to help people that are under they're lying under rocks and stuff, and people have to find them. And so I negotiated with my boss to say, I need to help. And she says, how long? And I said, I have no idea, but I just need help. Because if I give 100 euros, that's not going to appease my need. So I spent 700 hours working in 2010 to help Haiti. And Microsoft had me come talk. So that's kind of the background of why I can talk about this, because it's not the bandwagon thing. This has gone back over 20 years. It's been long-term for a cause, and for many different languages, not just one or two. Okay? And then I'm also on the linguist list. I got all these T-shirts here. I got to have T-shirts when you're doing things, showing things. So it's here. So the linguist list. There's 15,000 linguists that are in the linguist list. So all these academic geeks, basically. But so I'm on the advisory board for that, and so they do a lot of research on minority languages, endangered languages. Okay? So I support that, help find funding for that, ideas for that. They can work on field work and go and analyze it and write it, find a spelling system for it. Okay? So what is our current dilemma for minority languages? MLs, I'll call them, just to make it short. I'm not going to play the political correctness. Do we call it sparse data, low data, minority, less developed, less widely used, less widely spoken? It's just minority languages to make it simple. Okay, I play the sociolinguistic games of that too. But let's just call it minority and say that these are not the FIGs plus the Asian languages, pretty much. Okay? So it's pretty much that. Now, who deals with minority languages here, other than those? Who has an interest of languages that are other than those, that really want to do something with it? What languages? What language do you want to do other than those FIGs and basically Asian languages? What languages do you want to do? What are you interested in? What languages that you want to do business with? What? Just
Lao, Mongolian, Hmong.
Okay, so other Asian languages, but other than the major ones that are getting business today. Okay.
Would you qualify Indian languages as minority or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
From India?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 800 of them. So basically, so yes. Other ones?
Danish
Oui.
Okay, okay. And those are just, they're less commonly, they're part of the EU languages, but they're not the ones that make up, some of the Scandinavian languages. They're not making up the major part. And this is fuzzy spectrum. It's not, there's not a definition, perfect definition, but it's just, there's not a data evolved for some of them to be able to do work in other languages.
It's with republics from Middle Asia,
Okay.
like Tajikistan, Turkey.
Okay, so all the Stan countries, basically, yeah.
For me, it's like Sarani Kurdish, Tamazai, all the little languages that are not even country languages.
Okay. Other ones? Other ones?
Okay, we focus in Spanish target,
Yeah.
but also on the other official languages in Spain, like Catalan, Basque, and Galician, and sometimes we struggle
Yeah, okay.
to find good resources.
And there are people doing some technologies for Catalan and Basque. There's some limited things, and again, it's limited. These are, there's limited types of data and limited technologies to help be productive, whereas in many other languages, we've got at least the assistance tools to be able to do the translation work. Okay? So our current dilemma is language resources. And what does that mean? Language data. So translation memories are a type of language data. And they are scarce. The language data is scarce for them. It's very difficult. For Haitian Creole, I spent 9 months with a team of 5 Haitians in 1997, 1998. I spent 9 months looking for data. I contacted missionaries, I talked to everything to get whatever, and we translated whatever people would give us. Health documentation for the public sector. I just said, and I trained these people, all had green cards. They weren't translators. I trained them to become translators. And I hired everybody in Pittsburgh that had a green card. And then I worked them to make them translators. And that was for Haitian Creole and Serbo-Croatian. I'm not going to make the distinction, but it's, and then Korean. If you look at those languages, you can see what I was looking for. So the language resources, data, are scarce. Or low data, we call them. Then the linguistic computing resources for these minor languages are also scarce. The anecdote is in 1998 in Philadelphia at the Association for Machine Translation of Americas, there was a roundtable on minority languages. And it was stated in that roundtable that to do any new minority language, Turkish, I think Turkish was the idea, it was going to be $500,000 to put on the table to be able to do the translation system for that language pair. I do confirm that working for Sistran 6 years later was still the same price. Okay. Statistical machine translation has a little bit changed that, because if you just give it lots of data, then you can at least start it. But the problem is you have to have the data, but we don't have the data. So that's why I wasn't able to use a statistical machine translation system in 2010 with Haiti, because we didn't have enough data. So we have a dilemma. You need the technology, but you need the data, and you need to do it in some way. Okay. Another one is lack of interoperability. When those resources or assets are found, and I'll bring that up a little bit later in a couple minutes. I'm going to deep dive into each one of these topics. These are an overview. But there are issues of how we, as translation companies, how we annotate our data, or we don't, and how useful it is afterwards to be able to reuse that data across different types of systems, both textual needs for translation memory scat tools, but I build speech systems, so I need really reliable data so that I can map the text to speech, and so we can have it where your telephone can talk to you, or it can understand what you're saying in that minority language. Okay. Then there's the difficulty of finding trained and equipped human resources. We get data resources, language data, we get human resources. We have financial resources too. So there's difficulty of finding trained and equipped people. Are you having problems finding trained and equipped people to do the translations of these minority languages? You having problems finding them? I'm seeing some nods, okay. Anybody finding it really easy? Just really easy to find, Korean to Danish translators? Okay, okay, right. There's also a long ramp-up cycle to train the human resources in a distributed network, especially high competitive. Here we got a lot of people that are competing against themselves here too. We're going to deal with this. We've got to deal with that aspect of it as well right here today. And this talk, or whatever they're going to call this, is going to help us work through all of this as well. Okay? So long ramp-up cycle of in a distributed network. Okay? Across many different continents and levels and finding people. Okay? We have issues of trust. And this comes back to what Ralph said yesterday. He didn't use the word trust, but all of the words of the core values pointed to that, and we heard that in our discussion groups. The issues of trust. You have different types of trust. It's just not the French rock group Trust that sings a song, Antisocial. So there's high quality. Who is concerned about high quality retranslations? Who is concerned about that? Is anybody not concerned about it? Just translate whatever. Okay, let's say it that way. Anybody not concerned? Okay, then we have unanimous decision. So we have an issue of high quality, which means we want to find the right resources to keep and maintain the high quality. Why do we want high quality? Why do we want it? What is the key purpose of having high quality? Reputation, right? So you get more business. So you have high quality concerns, but then you have the other problem of the trust in the other sense. The only reason why I was able to, in 2010, help for 7 months is because I had already been trusted by the Haitian community for 20 years. I had already developed that trust for 15 years. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we have a double trust problem. We have the trust problem of finding the right resources that we believe they're going to work for us to do it, to help. But the secondly is the community itself of that language doesn't trust maybe those evil approach people who make money off of us. Okay? Anybody found that to be true when they've tried to deal with anybody? I dealt with it all the time, so. Then the resulting pure translation cost is often too high to justify and sell to the customers. It's high to pay the translators or the language people, experts, what do you want to call them? Then it's also hard to justify and sell it to the customers because saying their budget, they can't just don't have a limited budget. So we have that dilemma we have to deal with. And sometimes it's just not worth doing it because you have to spend all your time figuring out how you're going to sell it. You don't want you want to sell it first, then find the people, but you can't do that because you don't want to sell something you can't promise because you don't have the resources to work on it, right? So it's a complex, vicious circle. And then we have reputation issues. When someone influential allies with minority language causes, and we've seen that happen in the past 6 months, okay, in our field. And I'll talk about that. What happens when you use your reputation to help support a cause? There are reputation problems in different ways, okay? So let's deep down into these few topics, okay? That was the overview. So how can we build a minority language service business model? Reputation. Reputation is you want to be able to provide high quality, you want to make sure that you are getting repeat business because of your reputation. But the problem that you're going to do is that once you begin to be involved in a cause, then you will be attached and associated with that cause, and you will be attacked. Believe me, you will be attacked. Okay? And they'll say, why are you doing that? Why do you do that? Okay? Just another hype thing. So you have to deal with that because you will become associated with it. Now, if you're a native speaker of the language, it's a lot easier. If you're the white guy like me that helped doing Creole language standardization in the Caribbean islands back with all the black people back in the 1990s, that's different. Now, I have a black son, so I'm adopted in the black community, so I can actually use that to help. But it's very difficult to break into minority language circles if you're not part of the community. And your reputation, it's a long-standing thing. You can't just come in immediately. So you have to deal with that on a constant basis. So reputation is an issue. Trust, again, the trust topic goes along with that. How can we trust what do we want to give? And many of the times when I've dealt with Microsoft came to me I tried to find language data in 2010. I knew where the data was because I had found it 15 years before, but I couldn't get the data providers of books and things because of copyright to repurpose it so we could sell it to Microsoft, because I talked to Microsoft 6 months later, they would have bought it all. We could have funded those book publishers for like 5 years easily, just giving the data to Microsoft for a different purpose. But the trust issues are very different. It takes a long time to build. So we lost a window of opportunity. Microsoft told me we lost a window of opportunity. It's too late. The window's gone. So, finding and training those human resources. You need to find them. And how do you find them? How do you find those resources? What do you do? Anybody got it? No. This is dangerous because we got competitors in the room. Yes, that's, how do you find it?
We go to Barcelona next year.
Go to Barcelona, right?
Join the
Okay.
exchange program.
Okay, join the exchange program. Okay, ELIA exchange. What else?
We go to universities directly.
Okay.
We also work with the governments. They have literary departments and language departments.
Go to language departments where you know that you're going to find the people that are
at least qualified.
qualified, that are working for something else, but they speak the language and something like that. Anything else? We'll dig in more as we go into it. Technology and data, the chicken and the egg situation. We just talked about a few minutes ago. You need data to be able to use for, I can see our cat tools people going, yes, yes, and believe me, I was contacting people back in 2000 saying, here's all the data you want. It's a problem of having data. If you don't have the data, then you can't build tools to process the data. So you don't want to do little samples of test samples of, we've got 25 sentences and we're going to test everything. You do that, it doesn't work, you lose your customers later. So you want lots of data so you can find the problems to deal with so that you can go ahead and have a better coverage of how to process the languages. And I'm not talking about the right to left languages here, I'm just talking about those that use, let's talk about just those who use Roman script, Latin characters. Let's not go into Cyrillic and go into, don't even talk the African language with the clicks, okay? So we've got lots of other things here. But it's a complex thing for the technology people to be able to provide tools for you to be able to accelerate and do your productive work. If they don't have data to be able on the languages to be able to test it so that they can go ahead and give it to you so you can use your own data in there to be able to process it and work with it and save yourselves a lot of internal costs. Okay? Let's call it that. So this chicken and egg issue. Partnerships are an essential concept. I'm touching on a very big taboo right here. Because partnership is not a now the ELIA exchange is it's kind of a different thing. So it's interesting to see that for ELIA there's this exchange which is a movement towards that concept. But partnerships within the translation community. I talked with somebody a couple days ago, and he said that he was trying to sell translation. He says, and he goes and he's he's well known in the software industry. He went to talk to people and says, oh, everybody knows 3 translators, so everybody knows translators. It's easy to, and you recommend that multiple people. So you got to be the first one that talks to a VP or something or a C-level person, because they're going to have someone come the next day, and the next day, and the next day. Everybody knows translators. So you've got that issue of how to become first, but maybe it's not being about being first. And I want to discuss about partnerships, of how to build a business not alone. Because Tony talked about it yesterday, about infrastructure. You cannot just, if you do it all alone, you have all these costs. And even what he said is still costs. But you need to maybe leverage those costs across several that are doing for the same purpose, maybe for just that one language pair. But you want to build a business for everybody to be able to make something out of it, and then make it rather than just do it alone, because you got marketing, you got everything you have to do. It's not, and the trust, you got to build the trust, and if you got everyone's building the trust at every level for all those same people, it's really complicated. So we'll talk about partnerships. Learn to share. Learn to share. I talked in Poland a number of months ago, back in October, my 10 keys of being a successful translator, entrepreneur. And the first one was learn to collaborate and share, because that's more powerful than hoarding and keeping information. it's a kind of a bizarre principle with intellectual property. And I can talk, I'm a trainer of intellectual property SAP, so I deal with this every day. But if you learn to share and collaborate, it builds something. And people come to you. Why do I have 7,000 direct connections on LinkedIn? Because I've learned how to share and collaborate. And I get requests coming to me all the time. Because I give to the community, I give to the groups, I give to the discussion groups, I give that, you need to do that on a long-term basis, people want to come connect with you because they want to participate in that. So learn to share. It's a difficult thing to do. And it's very important for minority languages. So let's dig down into the reputation. How many of you want to establish a good reputation? I said that thing a couple minutes ago. I didn't ask that question. So I'm assuming you do, because you want to keep your business, you want to keep alive and surviving and grow. Tools, folks. Do you want to have a good reputation in the back row? Okay. There are lots of tools that have come and gone. So I've done a list of them. It's good to see that some still exist today compared to all those that have come and gone through. Noticed, this is fairly recent, I found a discussion on LinkedIn in one of the groups on the 4th of April, a couple weeks ago. And the topic was, have you ever had to reject a translation or interpretation because of your ideology or belief? And what do you think were the topics that most people said yes, they rejected for? What do you think may have been? Ideas?
Pornography?
Pornography, yes, that was one. And 2 people did say something about it, yes. What else? Weapons, yes. Several people did say that. Anything else? Religion, that's one. Okay. Other ones?
I was going to say religion, but brainwashing, sex.
Yeah. Brainwashing, it's, I mean, we've got a number of topics, yeah. Other ones? Politics. Ralph said there's a lot of business in some things yesterday, okay? Any other ones?
GMO or something like that.
Huh?
GMO, genetically modified.
GMO, okay, yeah. So, agricultural, yeah, I think it's
Fracking, things like this, things.
Other ones?
Any content that is not truth?
So, questionable content. I'm going to have you listen to something here, just for about 1 or 2 minutes.
In the mid-1990s, a UN peacekeeping force was deployed to Haiti after a military junta was removed from the country. The United States sent 20,000 troops home. A few years later, then Carnegie Mellon University linguist Jeff Allen went to Haiti on a contract for the U.S. Army. Allen was fluent in Creole, the language widely spoken in Haiti. His mission on the project, dubbed Diplomat, was to develop an English Creole speech and text translation system.
I spent 9 months collecting data from different people within the Haitian community, and then we in-house translated everything that we could for a period of 2 years.
Computer scientist Robert Faderking with Carnegie Mellon's Language Technology Institute was a lead investigator for Diplomat.
We built a portable translator that was on a laptop, and we actually sent it down to Haiti. It kind of sat on a shelf for 4 months, came back. Because it was kind of rare data, I made an effort to preserve it over the years after the project ended.
When Jeff Allen, now based in Paris with software giant SAP, watched news of the January 12th earthquake, he knew that Carnegie Mellon still had the English Creole database.
So I called Carnegie Mellon. I said, we need to do something. What can we do?
On January 21st, with Allen's help, Carnegie Mellon made the data public.
We put out on the internet site of Carnegie Mellon 13,000 parallel sentences, 35,000 parallel terms.
This rich data set presented an opportunity for Microsoft research.
And then just one more 30 seconds here. So, yeah.
explosion of interest. More than the Haitian earthquake struck Translators Without Borders with an explosion of interest. More than 1,000 Creole speakers from the Haitian diaspora volunteered their translation services to the Paris-based Humanitarian group. Co-founder Lori Thick says the nonprofit is distributing an English Creole triage dictionary based on the new data.
It contains a lot of interesting questions that you might ask someone to ascertain how serious their injuries are. And it gives a translation of those questions and their possible answers from English into Creole and from Creole back into English. For example, where does it hurt? How long have you had this wound? That sort of thing.
Thick says machine translators from
Now, I would say to people that I was working on humanitarian relief systems, and that's why I did it. But it was really funded by the U.S. Department of Defense and the Army's research labs. And I have two brothers and sisters in the Army, and they would say to their friends, "Oh, yeah, my brother built that thing we use, for the going out in the checkpoints." And that shocks people. Now, would I do it again today? That's another question. And at my talk at Microsoft, I did have the scientific advisor of the Office of Science and Technology of all the U.S. Armed Forces at the talk. We were talking that morning. There's interest in languages for the minor language for many different needs. And so this reputation and trust topic is a very, very important thing to think about. How you will be associated. I've been associated at all different levels, So it's very important to think about. It's not a light topic. Examples from YouTube and Facebook in an unrelated industry. I do music. Okay, we got tonight. You got to come to the dinner tonight because we have the Guilty Giggers playing. The Guilty Giggers are playing tonight. Okay, so. And I do, on YouTube, I get lots of guitars, so I do video reviews of 5 minutes of each guitar. And I get 600,000 visits in 3 years. I get 1,500 hits a day, okay? And I go to Paris and people say, "Oh, you're the guy on YouTube." And I bought a guitar yesterday here in the Lyon, train station in Lyon, down here. And he says, "Oh, you're the guy. You've given videos that, I've seen your videos, you've helped me buy guitars." Now, I did it for a little music shop in my local village that started up because I wanted to help a little local shop get started. I wanted to do a music shop. He beat me to it, so help him do it. And in the first 2 years, getting 1,500 hits, they hit that YouTube channel. He was selling guitars overseas because of his videos. But then on Facebook, people say, "Oh yeah, you're doing that for commercial interest." Well, I actually created I took my same videos that didn't have the marketing around it, because he added, and I just took my raw things in the shop, but I didn't say where I was at. The other guy just added things. And I put my own YouTube channel, and my own YouTube channel, 100,000 visits in just last year. So people say, "Oh, what are you doing it for?" And it's the concept of sharing. You see, I said that open source and selling have a very similar thing in common in principle, sharing. Except one has commercial benefits and interest, and the other one has non-commercial, but you're doing the same thing. So you can be tagged and labeled for selling for things, whereas I'm giving community because I don't want to have to repeat myself 20 times why you need to buy that guitar or something. If I make a video and I just share it, then I don't have to waste my speech. I'm a living offering memory. I never repeat or write. I have a 200 application. I like to rewrite what I've written before. I go and take it and repurpose it. So the video is the same thing. I don't have to say it every time. I just point people into the video and they have the information. But on Facebook, there are people that they think you're trying to sell something. But no, I'm just trying to share it. So you'll run into this. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing these types of things? Haiti disaster relief example, we just heard it, so I don't have to say anything more about that. It's very common for people to use their reputation and their credibility to further a cause. Do you folks do it? Saying, "I'm VP or CEO or I'm this or that," and you use it to further a cause for some other topic. to be able to give credibility, you loan your credibility to that topic to further it. Why did Haiti stay in the news for a year in 2010? Because I was behind it on Twitter and Facebook every day. And I made sure that the volcano in Iceland and the tsunami here and this and that didn't make Haiti disappear, because I had other competing disasters. But you have to keep in the news. And when you're associated with it, then you get blamed for being commercial. Okay? So you have to think about this when you are going to go into something that is niche and different. Trust from minority language groups is built, it is never bought. Many of my fellow Americans believe that you can buy trust. Okay? And you can in business transactions at high levels on certain things. But believe me, you will never, never be able to buy trust from these communities. You need to earn it. And it takes a long time to do it unless you're part of it. So you need to decide on the longevity and what's your return on investment? What's the short term? How much you can invest into it for it to be able to benefit your business. And sometimes we all have issues of, we don't go into something that's going to take 3 or 4 years. We want something that's going to have fast return on investment. But this doesn't. It can. No, it can. I can tell you how to do it. Okay, I've worked with things. You do certain of these topics I've talked about. You can do it for return on investment, but you will get associated with other things you might not want to. So you have to make choices. Okay? So you need to decide how much you're going to build into it, and how much you're going to develop the trust and deal with the problems of trust, deal with the politics of trust. It takes time. Okay? Longevity and perseverance are potential factors or indicators of real valid fruit. When I say to people, you can see people come and go, but when you see a few people in our industry that are still talking about it, I'm still talking about 20 years later, and I don't have to come here and talk about it. I can go talk about other things. I do. I was surprised this topic was actually accepted. I thought, great, this is really cool. People already want to hear about it, or people think that other people want to hear about it. But I don't have to talk about it, but I do. Because I believe that it has great potential for our industry on more levels than just pure making money. It's going to help deal with the share and the partnership and other things too. And it's going to help the languages themselves to remain and not be swallowed in by and bulldozed over by our other major languages. Question, do you participate in online and in-person minority language and ethnic discussions or discussion groups? I didn't hear that a few minutes ago. How do you proactively find people? Do any of you participate in minority language discussion groups online or in person? Do you do this?
LinkedIn groups.
LinkedIn groups, okay.
Facebook groups.
Okay, so you participate in some of those? Okay.
Powwows in Proust.com.
Okay, powwows. Okay, the powwows. Okay.
That's what I'm.
Okay, so you're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's good to hear. Anybody else doing proactively participating? That's something to think about. For MT, I was in all of the Lancer lists back in the 1990s on top of machine translation of the translators. I've been on all those lists for 20 freaking years. Explain from the translator's perspective. And, I made a lot of friends out there and helped them understand how it can be helpful for them and not competing and actually putting out a bit. It's the same thing with minority languages. You have to be where they're at. So, how do we address the language data issue? Data has always been scarce, and it will continue to be scarce if we're not doing something about having the data and creating it. And I can tell you that the statistics are to have 3 people translating full-time that were not professional translators. You can create 14,000 sentences in 2 years on a language that has nothing, and translating Newswire. Okay, so I was teaching them cricket and baseball and everything that comes to that newswire every day. So I got some metrics here, and I know how long it takes to do. And we were filtering out information. You don't retranslate the stuff you've already translated. So I got papers on it if you want to read the papers. So the data is often not annotated, not ready for interoperable needs. Translation companies are usually not very good at annotating their translation memories, which makes it very difficult to put tools on it to actually be able to do other things with it. So you need to really do this for the minority languages to be able to because you've got so much data for the major languages, it's easier to deal with multiple occurrences of the same word or sentence or all that. But if you don't have that, you need to really annotate that data well. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that. There is ELDA and Paris that can, where I used to work. We can talk offline about how to do that better. But this interoperability is a big problem. And I think the technology folks back here are smiling and you hear them talking about it all the time. So it's a problem. And it's a difficulty, and we have to know how to better massage our data, our content, so that it's reusable for other purposes, other than the one we're doing it with. Because it can be used, and you can actually resell the data for other purposes. You can resell your TMs not for the translation needs, but for other things, for building speech systems. Okay? You can actually make money off your data doing it for other things. It's just different licensing scheme. Okay? The providers, there are some language resource providers that are constantly seeking new data for creating starter kits for other technologies. ELDA up in Paris, where I used to work 15 years ago, is doing that. And he wants to know where there's data. So he's willing to talk. Good language resource data takes time and it costs money, and you have to pay for it in the end. It's not free, because you know what free is? Called Google. And the reason why people complain about Google Translate is because it's scraping the internet of all the data that's there. And the data hasn't been spell checked, hasn't been going to grammar checkers. Okay? So garbage in, garbage out. So don't complain about Google, because what they're doing is they're just using the data that's free. And the free data is not clean data. Okay? There are some little things too. So really good implementations are where you go through and have it. Okay? Next, traditional licensing channels for language data versus new generation usage. There are different ways to license data. I'm not going to go into all the topics of that, but there are ways to go ahead and use your data and sell it, or to share it, or to leverage it for other purposes. And you just have to be innovative with that and know what is available, or to actually find it. And licensing schemes for new data need to apply to different needs. And there are a few providers here, the ELDA or the LDC Language Data Consortium or the Linguistless I mentioned a couple of days ago, are places that you can find data or can make your available. Even Taos, does that too, but you have to think beyond your own local TMs. And there are ways to, but you got to go state your needs. If you don't state your needs, then they can't look for it for you. Okay? So, don't we say this for our own business? Ability to provide and share data is a powerful influential factor. Very powerful. But the problem is intellectual property and what we do. How do we handle that? How do we tackle the need for translation human resources? Well, what is the typical human resource cycle to hire a decent minority language expert? Anybody got an idea? How long does it take you to find somebody, to go through this cycle to find one person that's decent to do something? Any idea? Ballpark idea? Just
2 or 3 months.
6 months.
Maybe.
2 or 3 months, 6 months? We get not full time, but it takes there's a elapsed time and then the actual time, but there's a time factor.
It depends on the requirements and where you are looking at.
Okay, it does, we know. But what we're saying is everybody's all doing this. Okay? We're all doing this individually. You need to go where the resources are, you need to mingle with them. You're mingling with all the colleagues here, and so you need to go where those resources are, and you got to mingle with them. Groups, the discussion groups, you got to be there, present. If you're not present, then you don't exist. And you got to get the trust. You come in, you got to lurk for a while, and then you got to participate. That's how it happens. Passive incoming recruitment. You know, if you're just waiting, come to us, have a need, and come to us, and we'll hire you. Well, you're not going to find many people. You have to be proactive in influencing, and you're doing proactive influence development and finding people, finding where they are and being where they're at, breaking into the circles with every possible way to build that. You need to take the time. Why do you not find people? Why are you not participating in the discussion forums? That's my question. Why are you not participating in the discussion?